Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. Live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for Thursday, December 7th, 2017. It's MLS Cup Week. Only 2 days left till the big day to talk about, once again, Seattle, Toronto, the big game on Saturday. Joining us on the line from Philadelphia Inquirer, Jonathan Tannenwald. Jonathan, good morning.
Good morning. Is Duane awake yet?
Yeah, I'm awake. Yeah, I'm about to throw my laptop through the window because you ever notice that whenever a Windows update happens at the worst possible time, so you're staring at it for 1% for a half hour when you can't get on your Skype because they've attached everything together and it makes you on the screen. But that's
I've been there. I'm coming to you live from the Inquirer newsroom, so I apologize to the listeners in advance for any natural sound that you may hear.
fair enough. Only natural sound you can hear from me is me screaming at Microsoft and Skype, but alas, I'm on my phone now, so it's all good. Jonathan, yeah, it's MLS Cup week. Big media party, so you can't be here for that. So I'm excited for that. So I'm going to look forward tonight, and I'm sure all the listeners really care about that stuff. But what they do care about is the game on Saturday. We've been focusing a lot on Toronto for obvious reasons this week, but I wanted to have Jonathan on, an outside voice, a neutral voice, to sort of look at Seattle
live on the Sports Podcast.
So let's start with the Sounders here today and sort of discuss what they've looked like in this playoffs, this great defensive streak. Is this a case, Jonathan, of the Sounders really coming in the right time again, or is there a bit more of the West was just a little on a downside this week, and we're not really going to find out what their form is until they take to the field on Saturday?
Well, it's interesting. I heard from. I was on a conference call with Brian Schmetzer and Stephen Fry earlier this week, and
once again,
I asked them both, "Do you think this game's going to be another scoreless draw?" And
on Saturday,
Schmetzer said he didn't.
On the line from Philadelphia,
and Fry said he would quite like it,
Jonathan
which of
Tannenwald.
course
Jonathan,
will
good morning.
disappoint the aesthetically minded folks out there. But nonetheless, I would not be surprised if we find out that if Seattle tries to play for another 0-0 because they really don't care about style.
Possible time, so you're staring at it for 1%. Well, that would beg the question whether they're trying, with Fry saying something like that, maybe they might be trying to play a little mind games with the penalties. Do you think the fact that Toronto lost that shootout last year does play on them? Do you think that they are a little nervous of the possibility of this going to penalties again, and Seattle would have an advantage if it were to happen?
I don't think they're nervous. I don't think they're nervous about anything at this point because of the way they've played all year and how determined they have been to get back to this. But I do think that if it did get the penalties, Seattle would have the better goalkeeper, and that's something that they'd have to contend with.
Microsoft and Skype, but alas.
Jonathan, when you're looking at the possibilities for on Seattle of winning the MLS Cup back to back, is it something that is surprising when you're looking at where they were just 18 months ago?
Not really. They have too much talent. They have, even though Jordan Morris is hurt, they still have Clint Dempsey, they still have Nicolas Lodeiro, they still have Roman Torres and Stephen Fry anchoring the back. So no, it doesn't surprise me. Now, would they have beaten Portland if Portland had beaten Houston? That I don't know. But, once they beat Vancouver and once it was set up for them to play Houston, it seemed to me pretty clear that they were in pretty good shape to get here.
Are you surprised by the excitement? Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's because I don't know. I'm excited for MLS Cup this year. I was last year too, and last year being in Toronto as well. But this year I'm staying in Montreal, and I'm getting excited. I'm taking every single press conference, videos, anything I can watch, get my hands on. For me, this game, I don't know. It's the same as last year, but there's a little something special. It's not about Toronto. It's not about because it's the team of my city is rival with. There's a little something special. I feel we might have an actual interesting MLS Cup final game by itself.
I think we might too, and I think I will get there by Saturday, but I'm not there yet. I think part of the buzz for me last year, part of what made it special, was it being on prime time on broadcast television down here, which it hadn't been. And this year, it's back to Saturday afternoon on ESPN. It's a day when there's a million things going on in sports. I'm going to cover a basketball game before it, and then rushing off to a bar to watch the soccer. So it's, the buzz isn't down here. And also, down here, everything is just steamrolled right now by the U.S. Soccer Federation presidential election. And I know we're going to get to that at some point today, but it's sucking up all the air, all the noise, all the tweeting, all the everything, and it makes it very difficult to be able to focus even for a moment on anything else.
It's certainly, from an outside observation, I'd go so far as it's a bit obsessive what's happening down there with that now, and I'm not sure it's completely right, but I guess I get the anger a little bit. We'll get back to that. I want to stick to MLS Cup for a second more, though. I've asked all of our guests this week what they think the tactical lineup will be. We have two teams that like to possess the ball, that like to control the play. You mentioned earlier that it wouldn't shock you if Seattle set up in a similar style the last year. So let's just ask you blunt on both sides here and how you think that they'll approach this game tactically.
Well, I think Toronto's going to go for it. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think they really want it, and I think they're going to throw the kitchen sink at trying to score. And I'm not sure what to expect out of Josie Altidore yet, but I do know what to expect out of Giovinco, and I think as has been made clear to all of us at this point, Victor Vasquez is the key to so much of it.
Were you surprised, Jonathan, by Seattle? We've talked all season long together and everywhere we talk about soccer, how Toronto, the death of Toronto, how Toronto is good, maybe the best team ever, they have to go to MLS Cup, it's MLS Cup or bust. Took a long time for us to talk about Seattle. They didn't have the beginning of season as anticipated, but when it was time to put the wins together, they were there at the right moment and great performances. Are you surprised by seeing Seattle at this point? Jonathan? I think we lost Jonathan. I think we lost Duane as well. Well, we'll get both on the line as soon as possible. But I am surprised of seeing Seattle in the MLS Cup just because of the fact that they had difficulties with getting the result at the beginning of the season. And then at the end, they got the right results. And the Rodriguez, the Lodero, and of course, Clint Dempsey being here this year, not having an art problem like last year, it makes a big difference. Well, we'll take a quick break and we'll try to fix the connection, and we'll be right back.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast. You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
Yeah, for sure.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. The iTunes, Apple Pod, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast. You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
Yeah, for sure. It's
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Sorry for the
I heard
technical.
we needed to call the fire department.
No, we're good. Everything's working. I don't know what happened here. We lost both of you, and I was trying to get you back, but now we're back. Let's just start over. We had some little technical issues. Jonathan, good morning.
Hi, hello. Live from the Philadelphia Inquirer newsroom with all of the natural sound that it brings with it.
We have Duane as well. Duane, you there? You there?
Yeah, still here, Kevin. So we're starting completely over, to be clear.
I'll just talk about soccer.
Okay, all right. Let me jump in with two questions, and I'll let you grab two after that. Yesterday's show we talked a little bit about Michael Bradley, and sort of the reaction that he's having, and what his legacy is here in Toronto, and how he's perceived in the United States. So I want to ask you. Jonathan is someone who has covered the U.S. men's national team quite closely, knows MLS quite closely, is quite well aware of the issues, creating this hatred towards Michael Bradley. I'll ask you a point-blank question. Is the reaction towards him completely fair, not fair at all, or something in the middle?
I tend toward what Josie Altidore said when he was in New York playing in the playoff game against the Red Bulls. You want to boo him and Michael because of what happened in the World Cup. That's completely fine and acceptable, and they understand why. You want to make it personal and advocate, as somebody in my mentions did yesterday, for throwing objects at them to injure them from the stands, and trying to destroy their lives and their livelihoods just because they happen to so deeply offend a relatively small number of people, all things considered. I think some of that might be over the top. Anybody who says Michael Bradley is a failure in life, he's making a lot more money than most of the people who are claiming that, I think. And he's getting to raise his children in one of the best cities on the planet to do so, and leading a very nice life and getting to play soccer instead of working in a factory. So I don't think he's failing in life. Did the U.S. national team fail to reach the World Cup? Yes, they did. Are there ramifications? Yes. Should Bradley be off the national team for a while? Yes. Let somebody else have a try. Should he be shot, in the public square? I'm not so sure.
Well, yeah. Was it completely his fault and Josie's fault, or are they getting the lightning rod because they are the two big names that came back to MLS, and it's all tied into the USSF and the election, and just under a feeling of discontent amongst, as you said, a very loud minority of people out there. at any rate. Let's go to the USSF election. Obviously, it's highly contentious. Yesterday, Twitter blew up with, I don't even know how to describe it, complete irrational insanity.
Well, that's on the hour at this point.
Yeah, in terms of the of this conspiracy stuff out there. So I don't. Let's ask the question in a more reasonable way. Is there any fault to lie, but to those that have covered this game in the United States, that maybe they did become, because of the nature of soccer coverage, where it is a small world, where it is sort of easy to become friendly with the people that you're covering, just because it is so small and you have maybe more access than you might on a more traditional North American sport. Is there any complicity there in terms of the problems that the U.S. has had?
That's an interesting question to answer, but let me see if I can do it this way. I've known Kyle Martino personally for years. I've known Eric Winalda professionally for some years. Obviously, people like Grant Wall and Alexi Lawless know Eric personally and professionally very well because they've worked with him at Fox and elsewhere. The community is not that big. It has never been that big. It will be a long time before it is that big. There are always going to be, look, I have some difficulty covering Kyle's presidency because I know him so well, personally. You know, I try very hard when I'm writing and reporting to take a step back and not be reactionary in the moment, even though a lot of my readers are reactionary in the moment and are trying to get me to scream things because it makes them feel good. And let's be very clear that there's one particular caucus. I think this much I think is objective. The Winalda fans out there employ a lot of the same tactics on social media that we have seen in actual political elections in recent times. I think that's fair to say, and gentlemen, I think the two of you would agree with it. And if you are not, if every single tweet you write is not extolling Eric Winalda in almost religious terms, they will try to shoot you. And I just don't think that's right. There are ways to be critical of Kathy Carter's conflicts of interest with Soccer United Marketing, which are clear and which she needs to address. And while we're on the air, Grant Wall just published an interview with her, that I'm really looking forward to listening to, in which he put the questions to her about that, because Carter was on ESPN on Wednesday night, and all of the questions were softballs, and that was very disappointing. Especially, not in part because of that, in part because there are 8 candidates, and ESPN has not given them all equal time. I am actually, in my writing, working under the same rules in my newsroom that our presidential election and mayoral election and gubernatorial election and so on, that our political reporters work under in terms of equal time provisions. It's difficult, but it's the right thing for me to do.
So,
but again, there's a certain segment of the people who, because I don't say what they want to hear with everything I write, believe that I should be shot.
So, Jonathan, Sunil Gulati announced that he will not run for re-election. Kathy Carter of Soccer United Marketing is his designated successor in a way, because he's not running, to leave all the space for Kathy Carter. You mentioned last night's ESPN's interview as in the question, and not necessarily the right question, not addressing the conflict of interest that could be, that are present. What you mentioned all the 8 candidates too. If you had to give, I don't want to give you to give all odds for 8, but there's a few standouts in those 8 right now. We do see Kyle Martino, we do see Eric Winalda, and we do see Kathy Carter. Those stand out of those groups. What are the big differences between the 3 of them?
Between which 3 specifically?
Martino, Winalda, and Kathy Carter.
Winalda obviously has the biggest differences between of the lot, because he's the most in favor of pro-rel, and he is the most in favor of changing the calendar from summer to winter and various other things. Martino has not, I would say, elucidated all that many things, but it certainly his soccer brain is well known and respected by. He's a soccer person, and he's not a business guy, but he has some business acumen. Carter is very much a business person, who also played soccer and has been involved as a soccer person in various ways, not to the degree that Kyle and Eric have, obviously, but she's the business person, and there is a case to make that her specific kinds of business connections can be used to great effect in office if she addresses the conflict of interest questions properly, and she hasn't done it yet, and I'm looking forward to listen to, as I said, this podcast that Grant Wall did with her to see if she really hammers it. Because if she can do that, and talk about how she would distance herself from some, and maybe even, untangle some of the certainly not transparent aspects of the relationship here. If she can do that, she would bring a lot to the table, and she's probably the favorite to win it. And I also have to say this. The conversation on social media is dominated by men, and the presidential election has been dominated by men until now. And that's a big problem for a sport which is played enormously by women. The women obviously are the most successful of the U.S. national teams. I believe there is some evidence to say they are the most popular of the U.S. national teams. And you are a national federation which purports to believe in gender equality, so you've got to live up to it. But a lot of the candidates have spoken next to nothing about women's soccer. And a lot of the forums and debates and things like that, there have been no questions about women's soccer. And it angers me greatly. And you all saw that a couple of weeks ago, the North American Soccer Reporters and the NWSL Media Association put out a joint statement condemning the lack of coverage of women's soccer issues in this, and promising on our part to do better. And we're only a certain number of people, but we're trying. And it's tough because there are a lot of people out there who don't want to hear. And they're going to have to hear it. Too bad.
Certainly, yeah. No doubt about that. I'm thinking back to the CSA election from when Victor was elected. So we're going back 5 years ago now, and that was a watershed moment up here that started a very Canadian kind of change. It was a moderate change. It wasn't extreme on either end. Victor was, in many ways, and it's hard to remember this now, but in many ways, Victor was the middle ground candidate that won that election from more rebellious candidates to the left, we'll call them, I guess, and more conservative traditional candidates to the right, and he came up the middle to win it, which, again, is a very Canadian way. I think we're seeing a very American election in the sense that we have two extremes that seem to be screaming at each other.
By the way?
Sure.
Let me ask you in this regard. Were there a lot of loudmouths in Canadian soccer at that point in time who believed that by shouting on Twitter they could affect the election, even though they actually didn't have any kind of vote in it or anything whatsoever?
Are you talking about the community that was small in North American soccer? So slash that by like a tenth, and you'll have the small Canadian soccer community that was maybe shouting on Twitter.
Right, but did they specifically think that they had a vote even though they didn't?
Probably, yeah, but at a much smaller scale. And it wouldn't have necessarily been on Twitter. It would have been on Facebook, and it would have been on the Voyageurs discussion board, like those kind of things back then. But yeah.
Remember forums?
Yeah, well, yeah, forums. It would have been on forums. But it's certainly much smaller and a much different scale. I mean, you see that in our politics, our general politics here as well. You do have people that, if you look under a Justin Trudeau tweet, you'll find the same kind of sort of nastiness that you'll see under any other sort of liberal or conservative tweet, depending on your perspective, as you see here. But it's just at a different scale, and it doesn't get the same sort of traction for many sort of cultural reasons. But as I said, to go back to sort of what I was getting at there, is there the possibility, Jonathan, in your mind, that a middle ground, sensible sort of start the change process, but not blow the entire system up, which I think Ronaldo kind of wants to do, and I'm not sure how effective or how good that would be for the game either. The same as staying status quo might not be good for the game. Something up the middle might be the best medicine for the game, and I'm just not sure I see an option for that to happen. So I'm wondering from your perspective, a little closer to it, whether you do see the middle ground candidate having any chance to win this thing.
If this takes me a moment to answer because I have to answer without coming across as appearing to endorse anybody.
Yeah.
I think it's quite possible because the people who are actually voting in the election, which are heads of state and local youth soccer associations and former players and a few administrators and so on, in that, a lot of them are not the ones agitating for enormous overhauls to the professional game. Yes, they want some changes to the youth game. They're also very selfish. They want the money coming to them instead of somebody else, and that's always been the case. But the electorate here is not actually representative of all the people on social media or all the people in American soccer or anything close to it. So it's, I've seen some reporters and columnists out there doing sort of odds boards, and Carter's at the top of it, and Winalda and Carlos Cordero are also on there, and I suspect that Kyle Martino will start to move up as he starts to say more things. And I think that will make things interesting because he is trying to position himself as sort of the moderate. And we will see if he's able to actually win. I really don't know at this point because I don't know. I just don't know overall what the electorate is looking for. And I don't know enough people, nor have the time or the connections to reach out to enough people to really find out. The only one I've been able to talk to so far is the Eastern Pennsylvania Youth Soccer Association, which represents youth soccer in Philadelphia and so on. They have a nominating vote. They nominated Sunil Gulati, and now they have to pick somebody else.
Jonathan, let's finish the interview with the same question we've asked Terry Dunfield and Joshua Cloak this week. Saturday is the MLS Cup, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, BMO Field, Toronto. What is your prediction?
I think Toronto's going to win.
All right. Penalties or goals?
I don't know how.
That's $1 million question, isn't it? Jonathan Tannenwald of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thank you very much for your time today.
Always a pleasure, Phyllis.
And we'll talk to you soon. We'll be right back after the break.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at Soccer Today SPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Duane Rollins with myself, Kevin Laramee. Again, apologies for the few technical difficulties at the beginning of the show. It's what happens when you do, you're trying to do some Facebook Live videos, and I guess YouTube's going to be the place. I don't know. Well, really well yesterday with 5 rings, and today was different.
There you go. Who knows exactly what's happening, and it's just kind of a coincidence that both Kevin and I are having computer issues at the same time, but it's more effective when Kevin has the computer issues because he's running the technical side of things. It just means you have a different voice of mine.
Yeah, exactly. But Duane, now it's Thursday. We're getting close to Saturday. Yes, there's the USSF election, and there's, of course, Champions League this week, and Monday is going to be the draw. We know the player of the year. You know, it's an interesting weekend. A lot of great games, but I'm sorry to bring it up. I guess I have to. First defeat in what, 3 months, 4 months for Manchester City yesterday?
Meh. Yeah. Meh. It doesn't mean anything. It really didn't mean anything.
I know, but But if you had to choose like in a pool, who had Shakhtar Donetsk in their pool to beat Manchester City? Like no one.
Honestly, and I didn't bet on it, but had I been betting on it, I might have thrown some money on them just because of the fact that it's a dead rubber. It's a trip, and it's got the derby on Sunday. If the derby wasn't on Sunday, no, they would have went for it to finish perfect. But it just rationally, it didn't mean as much, and it's just impossible for players to get motivated in that situation. They'd already wrapped up first place in the group. Didn't mean anything for them to lose other than pride, I guess. I'm sure that they would have rather won. Any team would have, but at the same time, it wasn't worth Sunday. You got to understand the emotional attention and then everything that goes around that derby, and especially this year with it really. And I was talking to a United fan just randomly. He didn't know I was a City fan either. He just was wearing a United strip. I was at the world famous Scallywags on Wednesday. So the first Champions League, Tuesday. And so he was wearing his United strip to watch the United game, and he got chatting with me after because I think he thought I was either a neutral or a United fan, which I didn't correct him because I think it's amusing sometimes to have those conversations. And he was talking about how
it's like you're a double agent. You're just like listening to him, like, all right. You know that I'm judging everything you say right now, and I'm storing it in my mind, and I'm going to use it on my show.
Exactly. So basically, he was saying that in his mind, if City wins on Sunday, the title race is over. And I think I think a lot of people kind of think that it would put them 11 points up. And that's still things can happen in December for sure, but that would be an awfully big lead, and it would be a very symbolic victory. So there's no way that they weren't focusing entirely on Sunday when they went in to play, Shakhtar. And
a funny thing I saw yesterday, like we've talked about Arsenal in Europa League, like, oh, they're going to win. They have no opposition. And there was like a meme of Arsenal in their living room, And then there's somebody kicking the door and coming in. It's like, hey, we're Atleti. We're coming in and we're going to beat you and we'll win it. So you're not going to win anything. I thought that was quite interesting that Atleti might steal Arsenal's thunder in the knockout stage of the Europa League.
Yeah, well, the knockout stage of the Europa League is going to have some interesting clubs in it. We'll see how it works out, but certainly, Arsenal, they should be going deep into that thing with the resources they have. I still think my pick for the Europa League title is, and I've had this since the start of the year, and it's just a hunch I have. It's Milan. Because of the amount of resources they put into that project at the start of the year, and it's not going completely the way that they want off the start, but once they start to stabilize.
They're 8th or 9th in the Serie A, and they just fired their coach. It's now Gennaro Gattuso, winner of the World Cup in 2006. That is now the head coach of AC Milan. We'll see what happens there. But I hope interesting. You mentioned big clubs. There will be big clubs in Europa League and, of course, Champions League too. And we'll have plenty of time to talk about it today. Of course, Europa League match day number 6. And then it's going to be the weekend. And Monday we have the Champions League draw. But this weekend, Duane, after tomorrow, 2 days from now, MLS Cup. How do you feel today about the game?
Today's the day that it starts to become a little more real. After the show is over, I'm going to go get my pass and head up to training. And the media party's tonight, which is down at Real Sports. If anyone wants to try and crash it, you can go ahead and try.
So it's not at the CN Tower this year. At least I don't miss the CN Tower party. I'm fine with missing Real Sport party.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, I was a little upset. I was hoping to get up the tower. It's like my once a year trip up the tower nowadays. But
it only happened once.
Change things up.
It only happened once. Like, it's not a tradition yet.
I'm sure actually what this is all about is that they control Real Sports, so they're not paying a fee for this, right? Whereas the last year they would have. It probably cost a considerable amount of money to rent the CN Tower for 4 hours.
Just the cost of all the cheeses that were up there. That was expensive. But there's that. But being in the business for a long time, they're probably charging a cost too because they're giving each other business under the same umbrella, and it's easier to just charge people and make money off your brothers.
Well, the other thing that works too is that they'll give us an open bar for 4 hours, but then it's easy for those that want to stay to just keep and give Real Sports a little bit of money after the fact, and journalists are not known at all for their ability to drink. So,
sure, if you say so.
exactly. At any rate, so
Oh, the
that's tonight.
stories we could tell. Oh, the stories. One day we'll have an unplugged show and we'll talk about behind the scenes of the
my
soccer
goal
community.
for this year's media party is to not quite as be sloppy as last year's media party. For those that know me, so I hope that you can tell tomorrow. You can ask me that. You can lead the podcast off tomorrow with how I'm feeling. We'll see.
If you're on the podcast tomorrow, we'll know you'll be you behaved yourself.
Okay, yeah. Kevin will start calling me at like
8.
Yeah. Anyway,
Dwayne, you up?
There we
there?
go.
You come?
Yeah.
All right.
It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Fine.
Enjoy yourselves to everyone in Toronto. Today is the day that it starts again. Yesterday, a lot of the out of town media got into Toronto. Today it starts. There'll be training. There'll be some events, and we're gonna talk about it one more time tomorrow before the big game on Saturday. It's almost the end of MLS Cup week. Day 3 is in the books. Hey, was shaky start, but we fixed everything. We'll be back tomorrow with more Soccer Today. You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. And as always, until next time, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.